On one quiet night, while I was sitting in the living room, I heard the sound of something falling in my daughter room. I opened the door hurriedly, her cries filling the room. I asked in a calm and reassuring voice, "What happened, sweetheart?" She pointed toward the floor and said in a broken, fear-filled voice, The doll!" One thought kept running through my mind. Could this doll be cursed? My name is Daniel, and I live with my wife and my young daughter Layla in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the city. Our life is simple, but we're happy. On Layla's 5th birthday, I decided to buy her a special gift, something that would truly make her happy, something different. I wandered into a small secondhand shop packed with old items that seemed to carry stories of their own, most of them eerie. The shop was dimly lit, and the air was thick with the scent of dust. As I browsed the shelves, my eyes landed on an old doll placed in a far corner. The doll was unlike any I'd ever seen. Its face was made of cracked white porcelain, and its glassy eyes gleamed oddly under the faint light. Its long brown hair looked almost natural, not artificial. I felt an inexplicable unease, but I brushed it aside, convinced Layla would adore it. I paid just $5 and brought it home. When I gave the doll to Layla, she was overjoyed. She hugged it like it was a priceless treasure and didn't let it go all day. Seeing her so happy made me happy too. But deep down, I couldn't shake a strange sense of discomfort. That night marked the beginning of everything. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of dripping water. Groggily, I got out of bed, assuming I'd left a faucet running in the kitchen. But when I checked, everything was dry. The sound persisted. It seemed to be coming from Layla's room. I entered her room cautiously and found her sound asleep. But on the floor next to her bed was a small puddle of water. The doll lay beside it, its gleaming eyes staring at me in the dark. I tried to wake Layla and asked if she had spilled water, but she shook her head innocently and said she didn't know anything about it. Something felt off, but I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. I returned to bed and forced myself to sleep. Over the next few days, I began noticing strange things. The doll seemed to move on its own. I would leave it in Layla's room, only to find it in the living room later. At first I thought Layla was moving it while playing, but soon I started doubting that. The nighttime noises continued. It wasn't just dripping water anymore. There were other sounds. Faint moans or distant whispers. Though I couldn't make out the words. Whenever I heard them, I felt paralyzed, as if something unseen was preventing me from moving. One night, while I was sitting in the living room, I heard a loud thud from Layla's room. I rushed there immediately. Layla was awake, sitting in her bed and crying. "What happened?" I asked, trying to calm her. The doll," she stammered, pointing toward the floor. I looked where she was pointing and saw the doll lying face down beside the bed. I hadn't put it there, and I was sure Layla hadn't either. I picked up the doll, but the moment I touched it, I felt an unnatural coldness, as if it had been left outside on a freezing winter night. Ignoring my unease, I placed it on a shelf in the storage room and locked the door tightly. The next day, I decided to return to the shop where I had bought the doll. I needed answers. The shop looked exactly as I'd left it, small, dim, and heavy, with the smell of dust. The old shopkeeper was sitting behind a creaky wooden counter. "Excuse me," I said nervously. "I bought a doll here a few days ago. I need to ask you about it." The shopkeeper raised his eyes slowly, as if my words had stirred old memories. "Which doll?" I described it. Long brown hair, a cracked porcelain face, and gleaming glass eyes. At that, his expression changed. He seemed to know exactly what I was talking about. "That doll?" he said in a hushed voice, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Why are you asking about it?" "Strange things have been happening in my house since I brought it home. I need to know, is there something wrong with it?" The old man sighed, glanced around as if to ensure no one was listening, and gestured for me to sit down. "That doll isn't ordinary," he began. "It came to me years ago. A strange man brought it in. He said it belonged to his young daughter who had died tragically in an accident. After her death, he started noticing strange things, sounds, movements, as if her spirit was trapped inside the doll. He sold it to me because he couldn't bear to keep it." "Then why did you sell it to me?" I demanded, anger and fear mingling in my voice. "I didn't think it would cause trouble again. For years, it sat quietly on a shelf, just an old, forgotten toy. But it seems something has awakened it. Perhaps you shouldn't have taken it." A chill ran down my spine. "Do you know how I can get rid of it?" The old man lowered his head, deep in thought. Then he said, "I don't know. Some say getting rid of it only makes things worse." I left the shop with my mind racing and my heart pounding. Desperate for answers, I set up a small camera in the storage room to record what happened during the night. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At first, nothing unusual happened. But around midnight, a small puddle of water began forming beneath the doll, though there was no source for it. Then, its glass eyes seemed to shift, staring directly at the camera. That night, I decided to end it. I wrapped the doll in a black plastic bag and drove to a distant landfill. I threw it onto a pile of garbage and stood there for a moment, ensuring I was done with it. A strange sense of relief washed over me as I drove home. When I returned, the house was peaceful for the first time in weeks. I told my wife I'd gotten rid of the doll and reassured Layla that it was gone for good. But the next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. I walked to Layla's room to check on her. She was sleeping peacefully, but on the floor beside her bed was a small puddle of water. I froze, unable to move. The doll wasn't there, but that puddle was enough to fill me with dread. To this day, I don't know what happened. All I know is that the doll was different, as if it carried a secret it would never reveal. And sometimes late at night, I wonder, was it really over? Or had I only seen the beginning? This was Daniel's story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Have a horror story of your own? Drop it in the comments below. Your story might just be the next one we share.